And to continue the marine pollution, I mentioned DDT and PCB already, dichloro-diphenyl trichloroethane. PCBs, I said it wrong before, polychlorinated biphenyls. DDT, as I said, was used as a pesticide and an insecticide, and funnily enough, it turns out that some limited use is being brought back because it's a very effective mosquito killer. And DDT, even though it was banned, US kept producing it and exporting it till very recently. So this also happens that some substances, chemicals are banned, but in rich countries they are not used anymore, but rich countries could be producing it and exporting it to poor countries which continue to use it because they have no better alternatives and so on. But anyway, malaria affects several million people, kills a couple of million people every year, and the carcinogenic or cancer causing by DDT is considered okay in limited quantities when it can actually save lives by preventing malaria. So some kind of a compromise is required sometimes. Industrial chemical like PCB, Hudson River became very famous for having PCB settle down at the bottom, and then there was a question of whether it should be dredged and removed or should be left alone. I think finally it's just been left alone. These are widespread in oceans, and funnily they will be found even in the Southern Ocean, which is very far from human activities, which means the ocean circulation is eventually moving stuff all the way down into the Southern Ocean, so that even that is not so pristine anymore. Okay, these are persistent organic pollutants, and they are obviously toxic to marine life. They have a very long residence time. I don't know if you remember, we defined the concept of residence time of chemicals in water, and these have very long life, and they dissolve in seawater, and obviously they get accumulated in the food chain. As I said, Rachel Carson, the Silent Spring, and so on, was responsible for changing the laws on many of these environmental chemicals which cause pollution in the environment, not just in ocean but also in the atmosphere and inland waters like lakes and drinking water, etc. Okay, so DDT was found to produce thin eggshells in the Long Island osprey, in California brown pelican off here in the Anacapa Island off of Los Angeles, and it was widely used in the 50s and finally banned in the 1970s in the US. But as I said, US kept producing it and exporting it for several decades after it banned it for itself in the use. Okay, so the ban has worked. Some marine populations have rebounded. PCBs, once widely used as a coolant and insulation in power transformers and so on, in wiring, painting, caulking, hydraulic oils and so on, can cause harmful genetic mutations and reproductive issues. So these are the chemicals that I mentioned where bioassays cannot easily be used because they don't cause immediate impact and they don't necessarily cause mortality, but they have a long-term impact and they change life itself. So it's hard to always find their impacts with bioassays alone. So they are banned now in most, but few countries continue to use it. They sink to the bottom of the ocean, which is generally a good thing. But they continue to be pervasive, and as I said, they are made it all the way to the Southern Ocean in Antarctica. Okay, the other thing that became a poster child for environmental pollution and ocean water, coastal water pollution was mercury. Methyl mercury used in producing some chemicals was released into Minamata Bay in Japan from 1938, and they didn't know till a couple of decades, more than a decade, that ecological change was happening and that human beings were being poisoned, causes serious neurological disorders. I think by the time it ended, they had almost 2,000 deaths and many more infected, and you can see how horrifying it is when somebody gets infected and there's brain damage and neurological damage and so on. So that became known as the Minamata disease. I don't know if many of you actually played with mercury when you were children. It's a nice metal that remains liquid at room temperatures and beats up, and you can play with it. So there was time when people didn't know just how dangerous it is, and it was widely used in, of course, thermometers as a coating for these phosphorescent lights, and in some photographic equipment, medical equipment, and so on. Now it mostly comes from as I said, coal burning, mining, and so on. So some fish continue to be polluted with mercury, but methylmercury and Minamata disease is now gone, but obviously it was at some point a serious issue that happened in Japan. Okay, so we'll go on and look at other pollutants and come back to mercury in the context of fish and diet. How much fish which country eats and what level of mercury should be allowed based on how much fish people actually eat, and so on.